For everyone watching or listening, let me tell you who we have the privilege of sitting with today. Britt Keehn is a certified death doula, death coach, and the founder of The Art of the End, a practice built on a beautiful and radical idea that if life is an intentional work of art, death can be every bit as artfully appreciated. Britt has a background that you almost never see combined in one person. She spent over a decade as an early childhood educator, working in Montessori settings and with children on the autism spectrum. She was a life and parenting coach, and then death chose her. Her words, not mine, through 4 near-death experiences that gave her a first-person understanding of what it means to die and come back. She is now a certified death doula through Going with Grace, and her work spans death coaching, end-of-life planning, grief mediation, vigil services, family dynamic support, and memorial and celebration of life services. She works with LGBTQIA+ communities, neurodivergent individuals, persons with disabilities, and one of the most emotionally demanding areas of this work, pediatric morality and parental grief support. She is based in Reno, Nevada, serving clients nationally, both in person and virtually, and she has been featured on the Death Dialogues Project podcast. Her practice name, The Art of the End, tells you everything about how she sees this work. It's not clinical, it's not transactional, it's art. Britt, welcome to the Firekeepers. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be
Wow.
here.
So one of the things that kind of stayed with me when I was reading about your work is that the idea that death chose you. You said there's no time in your memory that death was a stranger, but it decided to get close to you like later in life, 4 times. And then you said something that really struck with me is that it was as if death needed someone to hear and understand. But that's not how most people describe their near-death experiences. That's someone who just listened to what the experience was trying to teach them and then build that life, around.
Yeah.
So in that vein, you said that death chose you, that when it got decided to get close to you 4 times. Can you take us into that? What happened, and at what point did you realize these experiences weren't just things that happened to you, but were shaping who you were meant to become?
Yeah. I love that question. So I'll go quickly because with 4, we can get very bogged down in the details very quickly. The first one was from hypothermia. The second one was from domestic violence. The third one was from complications after donating my eggs. And the last one was from complications of disease from an autoimmune disorder. The first 2 being accidents that were very traumatic. I didn't really think of anything profound other than, oh my gosh, I had this really cool experience that I hold very dearly. It was obviously both of them extremely traumatic, but both of them gave me very different experiences. With the hypothermia, I did actually leave my body and go someplace else, which was extremely cool. And that really has shaped so much of my grief work in terms of providing translation between what it's like to be on the side of dying and what it's like to be on the side of living. But that was a tremendous experience. And it was really cool, too, because I wrote about it on my social media profile, and another woman commented that her daughter had also experienced a water-related near-death and had said that she had an almost identical experience to mine of going to this place that looked like this indigo world, and that this happened when she was extremely young, and she talked about it all the time, wanting to go back to the blue planet. So that was really cool. The third time was from the egg donation. That was an extreme amount of blood loss, but the blood loss was happening inside my body cavity, so it didn't look like anything. But the pressure of the blood was actually suffocating my organs. So what stuck with me through that was how profound the amount of pain a human body can experience is. So when I have clients who are dying of disease that is very painful. I had one client, for example, who was dying of bone cancer, which is a horrendously painful death. And so it was something that I was able to offer in terms of guidance of how to manage that pain by kind of letting the pain envelop you and going into it, because that was the only way that I was able to survive that pain myself when it was happening to me. And the last time was from disease, specifically with Crohn's, and I was extremely, extremely near death. I remember having this moment in my bed, and it was a terrifying time because at that time, every time I went to sleep, I would sleep for about 16 hours at a time, which is very hard when you're still trying to have a full-time job, which was foolish of me, but sometimes you just gotta. It was a level of exhaustion that in all of my times of trauma and sleep deprivation and busyness, nothing has ever touched. Like even the word fatigue feels like an extremely soft word compared to how that time felt to fall asleep. You know how when you're just falling asleep nicely and you kind of just like submerge into the sleep, like the sleep just kind of, and you're there and it's this calm, gentle place. Or sometimes if you're really tired, you kind of have that jolty, like fall into sleep. This felt like I was literally falling off of a cliff into sleep. Like there was a depth to the unconsciousness that was legitimately terrifying. And I never knew any night as I fell into that, whether or not I would wake up in the morning.
Mm.
And I remember praying at that time because the awareness that I felt of separating slowly from my body was so profound. And I remember praying like, hey, okay, I get it. I think I get it. I think you're
Yeah.
giving me some really profound information. This is my 4th time now. And I think I'm going to ace this class and come away with some really cool information. But the thing about that is I can't help people if I'm dead. So if I could make it through this, I will use this information to help people because I really feel it would be so helpful. But once again, dead people cannot be that very helpful to the living. So please. And I've made good on that promise.
Absolutely. Wow, that must have been such a profound experience and experiences to have it happen to you 4 times. So what about that? What about what did your mind do in that situation? What about it surprised you?
We have a lot of anxiety as living creatures. That's just, I think, the most zen among us still have anxieties. And when you are in that space of imminent death, anxiety goes away. And it's like, as a living human being, you can't even imagine that.
I
Just like,
can't imagine.
none? None? Yeah. It's, things get very still. And it's not that there's not apprehension because, as the body's dying, depending upon how you're dying, if there's like a slow creep to it, as with disease, usually you have time to think and you have kind of a wave of your consciousness, your awareness between like living and dying brain. And so the anxiety can still rear its head during that time. But when the death is becoming more sudden, so with the hypothermic death, or near death, I should say, I never like flatlined or anything. With the hypothermic near death experience, I was unconscious. I had been in water. I was supposed to be the designated driver and realized that once I was in the water on this big party, it was a birthday party, we had too many people had come that said they were maybes. So we had like one big raft that we had rented, and then there was a few too many bodies. And so I volunteered to be towed in an inner tube. And as I'm on the water, I'm realizing I was a vegetarian at the time. I had forgotten to bring my food. So there would be no food for me. And I left my water bottle in the car. And to my knowledge, all of the liquid on the raft was alcoholic. And I was just like, we are going to be out here for a hot minute. And a buddy checked in with me and I just kind of griped. I'm like, man, my blood sugar's already low. I didn't bring water. I didn't bring food. And he was like, I brought margarita mix. I forgot to mix it with alcohol because I'm silly, but you can have it. And he had it in this like big leather bladder. And I was like, oh my God, you're a godsend. Like at least I'll have some sugar in my body. And it
Right.
turned out that it was pre-mixed. So I had an entire pitcher's worth of margarita on an extremely empty stomach, and I went to sleep.
Mm.
So as the party continued to tow along this long river all day and into the night, and I was just the quiet thing being towed behind, everybody forgot about me. They checked on me. And as the water got cold, I started to freeze. And so I have no recollection of leaving. It's just, I remember that conversation with the friend and some amount of time of kicking it on the river with my friends. And then I was not in my body anymore. And it was this blue, just indigo blue, extremely dark blue place. So, when you're like outside and you look up and you have this sense of the roundness of the stratosphere, right?
Yes.
You're just looking up, but there's a sense of roundness. And so imagine that you're in a field, perhaps looking up, but everything else in the world drops away and it's night. It was like that. It was like being in the middle of absolute dark nothing. But there was no fear and there was no anxiety, and I didn't have a body. And I was extremely aware of that because I could not feel physically. And I was very aware of like, I'm here now. And it was calm. And I was very aware of how incredibly peaceful it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to carry that awareness with me until eventually I heard from like way, like if you can imagine again being in that field looking up at the sky, what it would sound like if you could hear the voices of people that you know calling you from like beyond the clouds.
Mm.
Like it was so far away. And so I made a choice to go back, and I really had to like claw my way back into my body, and coming back to my body was awful. And that's something that I think a lot of people are very surprised to hear, like that there is this dichotomy of when you have crossed over and you have come back of, yes, you're grateful to be back in your body and back being who you are. I love being Britt, but having a body is heavy. Like once you've experienced not having a body, all of this is just immensely heavy and cumbersome. And especially if it's been nearly dying, it's painful. And so to come back to that reality and just be so aware of that pain was horrible. And I immediately thought like, oh God, I made a mistake. How can I go back?
Yeah. Right.
And I couldn't. I had already made the choice to come back. I was here. So that was exceptionally interesting, and dealing with the strange kind of grief that I can only liken the kind of depression that new moms sometimes get when they've gone through this extreme experience. And now they're just, okay, I guess I just take care of this living thing and I go about my life now. And the come down from that can be devastating. And you feel like you're just kind of a ghost walking around where just you do not understand your place because you have been something and somewhere else. And to just be you think I'm a human, you just think I'm another bumbling human, and I guess I am.
Right.
But I've experienced things now and I don't feel that way anymore. So that was a profound thing to carry. With the domestic violence, it happened a long time ago, and it is still hard to talk about. So I won't get into too many details, but the man that would become my ex-husband made a brief fleeting attempt on my life. And by suffocating, he tried to suffocate me. And what was so interesting when that happened is the moment he put his hands on me, everything went into extreme slow motion and I understood everything that was about to happen. It was just like I had a playbook immediately, like downloaded into me of just like, oh, this is happening. And I heard a voice that told me just very, very gently, honey, you're going to need to hold your breath. And so I did. It was just, there was no thought involved. It was just like, okay. And so I held my breath and the time passed, Thankfully, he gave up at a certain point and I laid there for a moment and then I got up and I made my attempt to escape. And it was just so fascinating to me how unbothered I was because everything was just as it is. Like, of course, this is something traumatic happening, but when you are in that space of knowing that this is something that is happening right now, there's a flow to it, which is almost terrifyingly elegant. That you just, okay, this is what has to be done now. I will hold my breath. There was no terror whatsoever. It was just time slowed down to almost a stop. And my body knew what it had to do and I knew what I had to do after that. And there was simplicity to that. There was just no second guessing. And I see that with my clients too, where the bereaved, the family members are these frantic bees just buzzing around their loved one. And I just see this look of love and confusion from the dying person as they're just being like, guys, you guys don't have to do all this.
Right.
And it's so hard for them to explain because it
Mhm.
comes across the way when they're like, "Oh, you don't have to fuss about me," as like, I am being a bother to you, and that's not what I want. But what
Mhm.
they're really trying to express is these things don't matter right now. And these
Mm.
things being your worry because this is happening. It's just happening and it's fine. Let's see, the egg donation one was extremely traumatic again with the amount of pain that I was feeling. Um, and at the time, I was an athlete. I was training really, really hard every single day, just staying in my body and just really being in awe of the experience of whatever it was, whether it's the blistering heat that I'm running in or how much lactic acid my legs are storing or how strong I feel today or completely not strong I feel today, knowing like I have 7 more miles in my legs or I have only 1 more mile left in my lungs or whatever it is as you do the calculations and come that much closer in relationship to your body. That was the time that this happened. So I was really able to be present with the mechanics of my body in such a beautiful way at that time. And I don't think that those things are coincidental. I think that those were timed gifts to inform each other. And I remember this pain that overcame me because I've always had a high pain tolerance. And the guy I was dating at the time was there with me and he was just begging me to please take pain medication. The doctor had come several times being like, can we please manage this? And I was like, because we didn't know what was happening yet, I kept
Mhm.
saying, if you take away my ability to feel it, then you take away my ability to tell you what's happening. And then we're not going to figure out what's going on. And he
Right.
was like, that is super fair.
Mhm.
Okay, you
Mhm.
seem real uncomfortable. And I was like, I can deal with discomfort. Like, let's go. And it got worse and worse and worse. And I remember getting to a point where I was having, it wasn't a seizure, but it was convulsions. It's a little graphic. If you've ever seen The Exorcist and that scene where
Yes.
Regan is in the bed and she's kind of doing this, I was doing that.
Yes.
I was just kind of snapping like a mousetrap over and
Mhm.
over again, which is a hell of an ab workout, I gotta say. It is exhausting. And at a certain point, the combination of the exhaustion and the pain together broke me. And that was the first
Mhm.
moment in my life that I've ever felt like broken. Like, this is what it is to be broken by an experience. I remember just realizing that I could not fight it anymore. And I just kind of laid back and I took a big, deep breath and I just let all of it in. And I remember tears just streaming down my eyes because it was just profoundly inspiring to me, horrifying also that
Right.
a body could feel this much without
Mhm.
short circuiting. Some people have and do pass out from pain, but here I was like feeling the absolute max of that. And to me, there was something that was not exactly soothing, but very anchoring about that, about just surrendering fully to the experience and knowing that this is one of the many gifts of my aliveness. This is not something that everyone will get to experience, and it has been given to me, and to reframe it in that moment as you get this.
Mhm.
This is not a punishment. This is not an infliction, but you get this gift and that it was chosen for you
Mm.
just allowed me to surrender to it and just let it be what it was. And it was horrifically painful, but it was also temporary and truly, in the most literal sense of the word, awesome.
Mm. Wow.
And then with the disease, it was, over the span of a year of just losing blood, losing ability, losing, and really got me in touch with the idea that with some deaths, you have enough time to have an identity crisis,
Mm.
and that
Right.
that can be such a gift. And that's another really valuable thing that I help interpret during my work is that this person is not attached to their bowling league anymore. Person
Yeah.
is not attached to the clothes they wear. They really couldn't give a rip about any of
Mm.
that stuff anymore. And Or like, but you always wore the color blue. That was your thing. And you always did this. And you always get his bowling trophies in here. He needs that. And he's just
Right.
like, don't.
Doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I can see how these experiences have really shaped your work, especially since you describe them so in a way that makes me feel that I was there, So I really appreciate that.
Very cool.
Now, I want to segue into the work that you've done kind of before death work, so to speak. You spent over a decade working in early childhood education, Montessori, autism spectrum support, infant development, and then you came to death work, right?
Yes.
You said there's much that we return to from beginning to the end of life. Could you explain what you mean by that, and what have you seen at the end of life that mirrors what you saw at the beginning?
Man, so much. We really do arrive to this world whole and complete and us. And as we move through life, we accumulate the debris of life of just, okay. And sometimes it's really cool stuff like, I was an athlete. Now I'm really strong and I've got this mind that can do this stuff. Or, I was a mom or I was a dad. But most of it is really just the debris of life. Like, and I worked for 10 years at Tesla, and then I did this for a while, and then I broke my leg real bad and was disabled for 2 years, and that was hard, or disabled permanently after an accident. And so, all these things, they do still inform us, but death really is a moment of releasing ourselves from all of that and returning to the childlike version of us that really just wants to hear the birds and, feels fussy sometimes because we get returned to the kind of factory reset of being new in our bodies again. I've seen clients where the family members will be like, he's acting really weird today. And they'll be at the door being like, I don't even know what to do. And you look in and he's just studying everything with such intent detail. And you really only see babies doing that. And it's because they've returned to that sense of awe that is innate in us, that gets bogged down against the debris of life, but is there in babies. We get returned to that of just being like, and when I come in and I'm like, hey, how's it going today? And they're just like, this is my hand. Isn't that amazing? They're like, look at, my skin didn't always look like this. And like, that's it. That's it. In this moment, time is suspended for them. And they're just being like, what? Wow. It has been a minute since I just looked at that. And this is mine. And I'm not going to have it much longer. But like, whoa. And that you see babies do that all the time where they're just like, look what I'm doing that. That's cool. And the desire to be surrounded by love and to have stimuli turned down and to just be content. Like, what does just content look like? Because when we're in a living state, we tend to be seeking stimuli a lot. When you're a baby or when you're dying, you just want to be content. Just, can you make it so that the pillow isn't jabbing me? Can we do something about that? Can we make the thermostat? Because I'm a little too warm. I'm 2 degrees too warm. And it can seem very like finicky, but really it's just like my only concern right now is just, can I be as comfortable as I possibly can be right now? And if you're dying of disease, that becomes a lot harder. And so that need becomes a lot, A, more important, but B, harder to catch. But that's really all that matters, is just like, I want to feel loved. I want to feel cared for. I want to still have a sense of autonomy. I want to be comfortable. And once you realize, you take away the role of dad or grandpa or mom or aunt or whatever away, and you just see this person and perhaps even see them as a baby again, and that not to infantilize, but to simplify, just being like, and for me, with the babies that I've taken care of, like, I treat them as whole people. So I don't feel like I infantilize the infants that I've cared for either. This is a whole person. This is a whole person, no matter where we are in life. And I think we get caught up in the roles that we play. But yeah, and I also the autism bit, because to die is to change your neurology. And so we really do start to, no matter who we were, reflect tendencies that mimic autism spectrum disorder, of just being like hypersensitive, just like they'll seem like they're just fidgety. And you ask them a question, Like, you realize they're just fidgeting with their blanket, nothing else. Maybe it is their clothes or whatever. But if you ask questions like, is that blanket bothering you? And they're, yes, it's scratchy.
Hmm.
It's like
Right.
growing up as an autistic child, like I remember the tags in the back of my shirts being torture devices.
Mm, yes.
My mom had to cut them out. I couldn't wear thong sandals because having anything between my toes when I was young was just tantamount to torture again. And these are the things that you start to see again where the sensitivity factor just gets driven up.
Mm,
The coping factor tends to get driven down. So a scratchy blanket is just stop the presses. Everybody needs to know how much this blanket sucks right now, and it needs to be fixed immediately. There is nothing more pressing in the world than that.
so that's pretty amazing. I mean, but there's actually, so you kind of have sort of touched on this too. We've communicated before, of course, and you've mentioned that death work treats on everything that matters most deeply to humans: feeling alive, feeling loved, feeling autonomous, feeling creative. Those are things that you kind of touched on, I think, in your answer. But it's also things that I think most wellness frameworks spend entire books trying to define, but you've named them in just one sentence. So could you expand on why you chose those four as the most important, I suppose?
Yeah, and that's really cool. I didn't even think about how, yeah, it is something that people do touch upon a lot. To me, it's, I just keep coming back to it. And it's something that I come back to in my classrooms, something that I've come back to in infant care. And it is something that is always there when I do working with dying people. I am a very active listener. And so a lot of the time when I get a client and they're brand new, they just, usually clients only come to me when death is like really impending. Like we've got maybe a handful of months at most. I always encourage people to come to me when they're in perfect health, but most people don't. And that's, we do the thing that we do when we can and when we feel called to. So they come to me usually when time is very precious and the clock is really ticking. And so when they come to me, they're kind of in a state of just like, yeah, like they gave me this prognosis and I guess I got just like a little bit of time, and they just kind of like ramble, ramble, ramble. And I learned to hear the values under the ramble of they start rambling about and what's going to happen with my daughter, what's going to happen with my son, what's going to happen with my spouse, what's going to happen with my dog, what's in, and like, okay, so family is really important to you. Taking care of them is important to you. And sometimes it's other stuff of just like, ooh, how am I going to afford? How am I going to afford? How am I going to afford? I'm like, okay, so you are really worried about how are you going to meet these needs within your limitations? And so when I break things down much smaller, I realize that those four things are the things that we keep coming back to of just, yeah, and I want my family to be there, but like not my whole family. Okay. You want to feel loved in this time. You want to make sure the people that you love the most are there. And when they say stuff like not my whole family, and you dig a little bit deeper, is like, yeah, like, my crazy racist uncle, I would really rather him not be there. It's like, oh, because you don't feel so loved when he's there. Got it.
mm,
You want to feel loved.
hmm.
Let's create an environment of people that gives that to you. You want to feel a sense of autonomy because even as we go, a lot of us in America have kind of glorified, and I don't want to take credit away from living facilities, those who don't have experience with it. My mom is one of these who just like has already decided, like, I don't want to be a bother, put me away. And
Mm,
I've been in some assisted living facilities that are absolutely fantastic, but they really run the gamut of what kind of experience you're going to get there. And this idea of, do I want to be there because it's the best place for me? Do I want to be there because I have medical needs that I'm going to get the most comprehensive round the clock care in this kind of environment? Or do I want to be there even though my children or my friends could absolutely have me in their home and have offered, but I don't want to be a burden?
mm,
That becomes the language. And when they make this choice, which is done in a sense of autonomy, I find that they get sometimes depressed or they really struggle in some way. with this sense of lost autonomy. And that can happen in the home too, as, death and disability increase their presence in one's life of just being like, I used to be able to walk myself to the bathroom, pull my pants down, and now I do not have the strength for any of that. And there's really no getting used to that. It's just, it sucks every time. And this, again, just stuff that some clients have told me. Some people just go with the flow of things, but some personalities really struggle with it. And so again, that is a theme that keeps coming up of just like, I want to still have a say. One of my clients, this was something that I was very early into my death doula work, and he was a very dear friend, and he was extremely beloved by his community, so much so that kind of everybody jumped in to help. And in the course of being loved so hard, he felt forgotten because everybody wanted to be part of the thing so much. Nobody was really taking the time to sit with and check with him.
Right.
And so
Right.
his interpretation of events was just this frenzy of activity around him that almost didn't have anything to do with him, to him,
Yeah.
because nothing was here. And so that really taught me a lot about like, okay, so autonomy goes beyond initial planning. Autonomy is something that has to be checked in on consistently as we go. Make sure that this person still feels like they are the decision maker. And if they choose to hand it off, because some personalities will just be like, I'm going to focus on dying. I really don't want to think about anything else right now.
Right. Right.
I choose my daughter. I choose my son. I choose whomever. I choose you, death doula, to make these choices on my behalf. And so we get to work doing that. But it's still, the autonomy is so essential to having this sense of ownership over our life to the very end. And the creativity aspect of that is so huge as well. We tend to, when we hear the word creativity, we have this tendency to think of artsy things immediately. Like, oh, you're very creative. You must paint. You're very creative. You must dance or whatever, artsy thing that you did or do. But creativity is in everything that we do. Some of the most creative
Yeah.
people I've known have been engineers and mechanics and people that just enjoy baking, and where they're just, you eat this cookie that they made and you're just like, oh my God, that is life-changing. Why is this cookie exceptional? And they're just like, I don't know. I did a thing with some honey and like put a little bit of matcha in there, like just a dusting. And I don't know. And it's like, that is intensely creative when you break
Right.
it all down. Just how we present ourselves every day to the world, how we act with people, how we interact with the world is all intensely creative. And we tend to think that it's just like, if I'm not making a craft, then I'm not a creative person. And really returning people to that awareness that they are already an innately creative person kind of re-sparks something in them, because dying can be, of course, very depressing. We all get very attached to this life, to this world, to this body, this identity, and leaving that can be very difficult. And it's easy to get bogged down in that process, and returning creativity to someone kind of reignites that spark of like, yeah, this is one of the really fun things about being alive.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I don't want my funeral to be in a church. And I know that everybody said my like signature color was pink, but I think I want to be buried in white. Like that feels to me. And like I had this idea, and just letting them really expound on that really returns the autonomy to them.
It's amazing. I mean, I think what you described is really not selling ourselves short, like really improving ourselves. But I did want to mention, so you mentioned when you were describing your work that really caught my attention. It's the idea of serving as an emotional proxy for clients who have communication challenges with loved ones. You kind of referred to that too. It's a very precise concept, but could you kind of unpack that? And what does being an emotional proxy look like in practice for you?
Man, that is one of these skill sets from being a person who's experienced death personally that I didn't think that I would use so much, but it is one of my main tools. So what tends to happen with dying is that we are having two very different experiences. The person who's dying is dealing with a body that is no longer cooperative on the track of being viable. And that can look a lot of different ways. They're all pretty much uncomfortable.
Right.
And I remember the last time that I was dying and I had this autoimmune disease that was just really trying to take me out. I had roommates and they were profoundly unsensitive. And
Mm.
one of them, I had been having like real friction with the other one. And I, of course, was in denial myself at the time. Like in the back of my head, I knew I was dying, but I was so focused on like, but I'm going to live, I'm going to live, that I really
Right.
wasn't letting anybody, including my close family, into how badly I was doing. I wasn't telling people how horrific my symptoms were, what my reality was. I was just, I'm tired, I'm sick, I'm in and out of the hospital, I'm seeing doctors constantly. That's all you need to know. And so they didn't really know how insensitive they were being. But I was having a lot of friction with one because she just thought she had noticed that like my personality was kind of a bummer because I was tired. I was
Mm.
exhausted in a way that I've never been exhausted before.
Of course, yeah.
And she just took that as me being very complainy and
Mm.
not being resilient. And what's her problem? And God, she's just like, it's always, ooh, I'm so tired. And the other roommate like took me aside and was like, hey, wanted to touch base with you. We've noticed some stuff. And I was like, okay, how does that look on the outside? How does that look? He was like, and he took some time and really thought, and I really appreciate his response. He was like, you seem very stuck in your experience. And I was like, boy, howdy am I. I am at the pit of this experience, bud. Like I can barely see your face out of this experience.
Mm.
And that really is what it is. So having that perspective of somebody who is so enveloped fully in just like, doctor said I'm dying. I know I'm dying. I'm on this bed. I got hospice. I've got everything saying I'm dying. And my God, every cell in my body is informing me of that every single moment of every day. People on the outside are not experiencing that. They're experiencing profound amount of preemptive grief and real grief and stress and trauma. And then they've got this person that they love so very much and they're working so hard for, who may be being snippy with them, maybe being
Mm.
cruel with them because they're operating in two separate mentalities, two separate worlds. And it's so hard because then grief becomes its own life threatening injury. It feels like grief really immerses us and makes it so hard to think of anything outside of the pain of like, no, I'm sorry. I could give a shit about your baby shower. My dad's dying.
Right.
So happy about your baby. My dad is dying. He's dying in my living room. Just so having these two parties that are experiencing things that are so all encompassing, it's really important to have somebody who can be there. And I usually take time to talk with each separately. I will talk with each family member separately. I will talk to the dying person separately. That's one of the tricky bits about when I do remote sessions, is that can become a little bit harder to get people alone and separate. But it's really important to hear where we're at, because I can kind of map where we are on the climb of the mountain of death. Very much
Mm. Right.
Sherpa in that way, where
Right.
I know the trail, I know the route really, really well. So I know, like, depending upon the symptoms and where they are neurologically, where we are on that climb and how far
Mm.
we have to go. And so I need to talk to them to get that information so that I can then come to the grieving alive people and be like, okay, I know that they snapped at you today. And I remember having a client who was dying of cancer and lived in California and had gotten the assisted dying prescription.
Mhm.
And so he had the medication at home. You have to be able to prepare that yourself. Statistically speaking, the majority of people who get that do not choose to use it. And I think that again has so much to do with just the sense of autonomy. But so he had this prescription just sitting at home to take whenever he thought the day was the day. And he and his wife had a lot of unresolved problems from their marriage that through both of their personalities, they had kind of swept under the rug throughout
Mm.
their lives. And now here they were at the end, and the rug is peeled back and all these issues are here. And they were just bickering and then being upset that they were spending their last days together bickering.
Right.
He would, because he's dying of cancer and is in so much pain, would occasionally say to her, just out of exasperation, my God, you know what? I'm just going to take it. I'm just going to take it now. I don't want to deal with this
Wow.
anymore. Which, of course, came across to her as, I would rather die than listen to you, which is
Mm.
not an equitable translation. So I did a lot of legwork of being like, okay, we have got two different realities here.
Mhm.
You're saying a thing. I know what you mean by that. So let me
Mhm.
provide a translation to your wife who is devastated by hearing that. And
Right.
then let me tell you, when you say that, I get it. She is devastated because this is what she hears. He's like, God, that's not what I meant. And like, yeah. So having that proxy to be like, you guys are so immersed in these two separate places and you really can't fully meet each other from down here. So I
Mhm.
have to have you come up enough out of it
Mhm. Right.
to be able to pass these messages and
Right.
simplify it. So that's where so much of it is. Death is truly you're in an altered space. It's psychedelic.
Mm. Yeah.
You are perceiving the world and information differently. You are receiving and experiencing reality differently. So how do you, for anybody who's done psychedelics or anything, like if you
Mm.
are having this world altering experience and some authority figure comes and shines a bright light in your face, it's just like, hey, let me yell at you for a little bit. Let me shout responsibilities at you. You're going to be like, you suck. Why would you talk to me like that when I'm in
Right.
this space? You are
Right.
making this things were cool and you're not cool. And that is very much how it goes. Just like you are altered. All of
Mhm.
this is altered. You are receiving information differently. And so to receive these very human, very mortal messages of responsibility and obligation and stuff, it's a bummer.
Mm.
It also
Absolutely.
it does not rank on the list of things that are important to you in that space.
So you mentioned that you take your clients on what you describe as like an anthropological dive where you explore dying culture across different places and times to kind of help them discover what death and ritual means to them personally. Could you give us an example of what that looks like and what traditions or practices you find yourself returning to most often?
Yeah, I really do try to meet my clients wherever they're at.
Mm.
So if they tell me like I'm Catholic, I want a Catholic ceremony, a Catholic funeral, I want to be buried in a Catholic cemetery, traditional burial, big fancy coffin that cost my family DK, burial
Mhm.
within a vault. That's what we've always done. That's what I'm going to do. I'm like, that's where your values are. Let's make sure all of that gets arranged for you. But I have had a lot of clients who find themselves really like in the last weeks of their lives wanting to pull the plug on all of those arrangements and just being like, these don't, I chose them at the time because it was what was available and I don't want to be buried like that, or
Mhm.
I don't want to be cremated anymore. It doesn't sound right. So that's when I have these conversations about like, okay, what about this process doesn't sound right to you?
Mhm.
And then I will give just as because as a neurodivergent person, I love to fun fact dump. I will invite them in and be like, did you know, if it sounds like part of what they don't like about maybe traditional burial is that they're just going to be stuck in one place. That's not who I am. I was always moving around. I'm like, okay. Well, did you know that, sky burial in Nepal is based on this idea that your body gets taken up by birds and then dispersed and taken into the clouds that way? Or that cremation practices were likewise a way to have the ash and essence of you be lightened so it could be pulled up to the sky that way. And just really hearing where their concerns are of just like, I don't want to be here, I want to be there, or I want to be here. And being like, how can we offer you other options that sound like something that you really want? I had a client who was getting really bummed out in his last week of life about the idea of a funeral. He was just vehemently, no, no, no. And this was a family friend of mine. Like, I was very, very lucky to be able to be his death doula because I had known him literally my entire life. And I knew he's extremely beloved by his community. And so not
Mm,
having a funeral, I'm just like, buddy, people are
yeah.
going to mourn you. And he's like, well, I don't want him to be sad. And I'm like, they will be because we love you.
Mm,
Well, I don't want them to just, if they're just dressed up in black and they're in a church and it's just a sad place. And I'm like, okay, so this idea of like a contained dark space that doesn't have a lot of movement doesn't seem in alignment to you. He's like, no, I hate that. And so it was like, okay, what if people just gathered? What if it looked like a potluck? What if they met at a bar? And he started being like, "Hey, I I heard this idea of somebody who just like they put a bunch of money and they created a bar tab and then all of their friends came to their favorite bar and they just had drinks on the house that he paid for all night and it didn't feel like a funeral at all." I'm like,
mm,
"Okay." And so we started workshopping like which version of that or versions of that can we combine to make something that felt more in alignment with his values because, obviously the funerals are for the living,
all right.
dying person gets to have their say, but we will be sad. Be like, nobody's allowed to cry. Tough. We're gonna, somebody's gonna, like, even if you have clowns and a whole thing and it's super lighthearted comedians doing roasts the whole night, there will still be tears mixed
Mm,
in with tears of happiness because we miss you.
mm,
You lived and you were loved and we miss you and there will be tears. That's just how it goes. But to break down the values and to use other practices from around the world to be like, hey, legally, we may not be able to perform something like a sky burial.
right.
United States law is pretty, that's against all of them. That's against all the
Nice.
laws. That's defilement of a corpse, and people get very upset about that. Um,
Mm,
so, but pulling the anthropology, giving the anthropology as an example, but then pulling the anthropology away, but leaving the values as an example. And I find that using anthropology reframes people away from their own death for a moment
mm,
to just be fascinated about a thing for a second and then realize like, oh, that has practical application. Okay,
mm,
that's cool. Okay,
right.
let's
Right.
let's work with that.
So death doesn't show up the same way for everyone, and not everyone has the same access to support when it does. Now, you've built a practice that specifically serves LGBTQIA plus communities, neurodivergent individuals, and people with disabilities. What has that taught you about what inclusive death care actually requires?
Oh man, that is a fantastic question. Death is very unifying. So first of all, like I really find that so much of however we identified and lived in the world, the process of dying looks more or less the same. The things that we have to worry about, like, getting death certificates, getting your medical proxies and your lawyers and all that, those are all things that are going to be universal, but depending upon where you are, there's going to be other considerations to be made. So, unfortunately, our country is dealing with a lot of really messed up smearing of the trans community. I have trans loved ones, I have trans family members. And so we are finding that we are at odds sometimes in terms of putting a dead name on a death certificate. And sometimes the family members can make that really hard too. And so spending the extra time and care to do research, depending upon what state they're in, of what their rights are, could they be legally married? And if so, can we make it so that their spouse is the person most in charge of all that so that we don't have to dead name them on a headstone? We can provide their chosen name. These are considerations that again get kind of dicey depending upon what state we're in, but it is extra legwork that really does need to be done to again make sure that this person is dying fully recognized for their humanity and for their identity that they had undoubtedly suffered and had to fight to be recognized for. And so that's incredibly important to me. It's incredibly important to them. And in the event where perhaps legality is preventing us from doing something ideal, I like to make sure that I'm providing as much emotional support and validation as I possibly can and finding whatever workarounds I possibly can to be like, okay, so your family is problematic. They do not want to recognize you in this identity. They want to call you by your dead name. They're going to put your dead name on your death certificate and on your headstone. That sucks. However, you have a whole community of people who know you, really, really know you, adore you as the person you really are. So we are going to make sure that there is a celebration of life or a memorial service, and we're going to make it look exactly the way you wanted it to, where you are fully seen, you are fully honored, so that they know that, this part I can't control. Unfortunately, there's laws, but we can still give you this.
Mhm.
And disability, there's a quote with disability of just something along the lines of disability is the one thing that 100% of the population will experience at some point in their life.
Mhm. Right.
Because
Right.
you will, like, there's gonna just, at some point, you're going to get hurt and or sick and or die. And
Mhm.
you're going to experience like, "Oh, my body doesn't work the way that it once did." And some people are born into that life and then experience more of it as they go. But a lot of us find ourselves at odds with this reality very suddenly. Of just like a thing happened and now I can't go to the bathroom by myself. A thing happened and now I am in a wheelchair all the time. And that can make dying look different. But I do find that it is also something that, again, because of the way death happens, there's a natural transition to it. Depending upon how their disability showed up for them, that can be a part of their identity that they may or may not want to be a part of how they are remembered. Like,
Mm.
some people really don't like it. Maybe they had an accident at some point in their lives. So, from 25 on or from 40 on, they were in a wheelchair. And this is
Mhm.
something they really, really mentally struggled with. And so they do not want there to be any pictures of them in a wheelchair.
Mhm.
They want to be seen as being freed from that. There's other people that have spent time in wheelchairs, whether, from birth they weren't able to use their legs, or, that was something that happened later and they're just like, yeah, I'm fine with this, where they're really like, yeah, my chair was always with me. That was my right hand man. That's my bestie. Like, please have
Right.
my chair. Like, deck it out, put flowers all around it,
Right.
donate it to somebody who could really use it or something. Like, I want my chair to have life. That was my homie. And so
Mm.
it really, you want to touch in with the person and how they're dealing with what they're able to do. And another tricky way that disability can come into dying is based on what the disability looks like when death is actually approaching, because that can really sometimes mess with the kinds of autonomy and rights that you have. So if you are dealing with something like ALS,
Mhm.
it is almost impossible to get something, if you're in a state that allows assisted dying, it is almost impossible to get that prescription because you have to be able to administer it yourself and you have to
Mm.
have a prognosis of 6 months or less.
Mm.
Anybody with ALS who has 6 months or less is already at a state that they can't self administer that.
Mhm.
So you have to be very wary of like, what laws are there? Can we bypass, get ahead of? Are there any loopholes we can work with to help get this person the death that they're most trying to achieve in that process? And just being aware of what the reality of that looks like.
This is my next question's kind of relates to maybe a very emotional subject, which is pediatric death work of supporting parents through the death of a child. It's got to be one of the most emotionally demanding areas in this entire field. So, what drew you to that kind of specific work, and what does that support really look like for a parent?
I remember, and I I always worked with kids before I started doing this work. I absolutely adore children, and working closely with their parents is just like part of this really important team. It's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. And noticing that like new moms feel this sense of isolation, and it's gotten much, much worse in recent years, but it's always been the case of new moms just feeling completely isolated, and you're pregnant and everybody's so, so excited. And there's a bump and it's visible and it's a thing. And oh my gosh,
Right.
and there's all this lead up to it, and then you produce the baby and everybody's like, "Baby, yay!" And then the mom gets forgotten. And she's had
Mm.
this whole transformative experience herself. This wasn't just that she popped a baby out, she became someone else in
Right.
the process. And this other version of her, she's grieving that it no longer applies, and also having to step into this entirely new, completely immersive and undeniable role. And her friends aren't calling her anymore because they don't If they don't have kids, they don't know how to interact with her anymore. And it's 1,000 times worse when we're dealing with the death of a child. I remember this talk I went to, this symposium, it was a death symposium in Sacramento many years ago, and the keynote speaker was there and she was taking questions at the end. And I raised my hand because it just occurred to me, like, I'm not hearing anybody who's offering support for children that die, because children do die. And so I was like, is this a thing? And I remember she kind of went like you could tell, like, even considering this question was physically painful for her. And
Yeah.
she was like, this is a very well-renowned death doula. And she was like, I cannot bring myself to do that work. I
Mm,
can't do it. And I don't know anybody who can.
mm,
And I remember just like my immediate response just flew out of my mouth being like, that means that I have to do it.
right.
Like, I have to.
Yeah.
Who else is going to support these people? It is
Mm,
so alienating. We have such love for our children, and we really see them as these kind of infinite sparks that it throws us so completely when we get handed a reality of, like, your little thing whose whole life you've already imagined since the time you knew that they were coming into your life, whether you were pregnant with them or you knew that they were coming into your life because you were adopting them. You've already been being like, oh my God, and we're going to go to this playground on this park because I saw it and it's so cute. And I'm going to put them in this outfit. And I already bought it. And then they're going to go to this school. And then they're just, oh my gosh, what if they want to be a firefighter? That would be so cute. And we imagine and imagine, and we don't even realize that we've gotten so completely attached to this reality that it's real for us. It's a reality in our mind. Like, these things will happen. I'm going to see them get married. I'm going to see them do these things, that when well, actually, your child isn't going to meet those milestones
mm,
because they have to die before then.
mm,
You realize, like, not only are you grieving the most important person in your whole world, but the entire future, this whole life that you've been unconsciously living in for
mm,
them. And it's devastating. And it's so devastating that other people don't know how to be near it. Now, even for me, just as a death doula, I find it difficult to give people my business card. I
right.
tell people what I do. Your death doula, maybe they've heard of it, maybe they haven't. If they haven't, I explain it to them. They go, oh my gosh, what a lovely thing. That's so amazing. I would have loved to have you when so and so who's close to me died. And I go, oh, okay. Would you like my card? So next time, since you just said I would be a godsend, and they literally like go,
Mm,
they
right.
physically recoil from my very cute business card, as if by holding it, they will be transported immediately to death. And it's the same thing for parents who are dealing with a dying child, where people just like, hi, yeah, it's so uncomfy. And that's when they
Yeah.
need the most support.
Mhm.
Their their family members, their friends, everybody just slinks away. And so much of the time, the reason people have gone away is because it's such a tender time that they are dreading saying or doing the wrong thing. And so they choose to
Yep.
do no things.
Mhm.
These parents are left in this vacuum
Mhm.
of nobody saying anything for fear of it being uncouth, wrong, awkward,
Mhm.
or having to, for a moment, God forbid, deal with any of their own grief and seeing their own child in that,
Right.
being like, that I could lose my child, and dealing with that reality. So they just leave them alone. And it's devastating. So it's just such a need. And thankfully, children don't die as frequently as older people. So it's not work that I am called to do much, but it is necessary work. And these people are in dire need of support. What's interesting about pediatric death is, especially for the younger kids, I would say, like, if they're 10 and under, they're usually so peaceful about it, because when you're young, you just kind of accept whatever life throws at you. You're just like, kids who grew up impoverished or in, like, even abusive homes, like, they grow up and people are like, oh, that must have been so hard. And it's like, I don't know. It's just what I did. It's what I had.
Mm.
It's just how it was. They don't really think about it. And so for a child with leukemia for 6 years out of their 8-year life, they don't want to hear about how hard it is, because it's just been their life. They know it's been really hard on mom and dad, though.
Yeah.
And so that's where most of their concern tends to be. They're like, I really hope that my parents are okay. I really hope my sister's okay. I'm worried about them. They're not worried about like, oh, I'm not gonna go to college and I'm not gonna get they weren't attached to that. They were just living.
Right.
So they tend to be super chill about it. And so I really love spending time with them because of that. But it's the families that need the most support during that.
So you've kind of touched on this. People don't really know how to provide support when a loved one's entering this kind of a journey. We're products of this culture that doesn't actively teach us what to do when someone's dying. So why do you think that is? Like, what happened to us as a culture that we lost this skill,
Man,
I guess, for lack
I
of a
know
better
I
word?
am not alone in thinking this. Caitlin Doty's done a video on it, how the funeral industry kind of separated us. So
Mm,
during the Civil War, we've got just way more dead people than we've had since like
mhm,
the plague. That was in Europe. It's America. We've got so much death. And what do we do? And we gotta get these soldiers back home. And how are we going to do that? Some of them are a mess. Some of them we've only got trains. It's got to be a long ride. What do we do? And so we create funeral homes and embalming. And that's great. It's a godsend because now we can get this soldier 4 states away back home so that his family can actually like look at him, spend some time with him before we get him in the ground. And that's amazing for the grief experience. And that still happens today where like embalming is really so necessary for people's grieving. If you live in a place like Newfoundland, where like the ground is literally frozen for a decent chunk of the year and you happen to die during that time, it's important that you get embalmed and refrigerated so that your family can spend that time with you when it's time to actually put you in the ground or cremate you or whatever. So it had its uses, but once we handed over that task to somebody else,
mhm,
then of course capitalism took the reins and was just like, oh, don't you touch that because I want the money. So let me do all that.
right.
And then attitudes changed because instead of washing our own dead, tending our own dead, and being with them the whole time, it's, ooh, can't somebody else do that? And classism came into it of like, can't you afford to have somebody take care of that for you? Ooh, who wants
Mm,
to? And this ugh got attached to it. And we
yeah.
really lost the magic. A lot of people, when they hear my work, they're like, oh my gosh, that must be so heavy. And I'm like, the heavy doesn't compare to the magic.
Mm,
Like, they're just not equitable at all. The magic outweighs the heavy by mountains because it's just about being present. Yeah, we handed over a lot of it. And some of it has been really, really marvelous in terms of what we're able to do, like, with embalming buying us more time and with funeral homes being able to take care of details that would otherwise be overwhelming. And of course, hospitals taking on so much burden and really buying us more time and more care. All of that is amazing. But it started putting up barriers to how involved we, the people who love these people, can be. And that's
mm,
where we lost touch. And so
mm,
I think this work is really an important way to invite people to give them permission to come along because I find that people actually really want that. They
right,
want
right.
to know it's okay. Can I touch my mom when she dies? Please give her a hug
Mhm,
if that's what your heart wants to do.
mm.
There's nothing wrong with that.
So when you look at the broader death doula community, who inspires you? Who's doing this work in a way that you respect?
Two biggest names for me are Nyla Francis and Narinder Bazin. And they're both amazing, amazing human beings. I think they're both on the East Coast. Nyla is just about as open a heart. Like she's just a heart with a beautiful smile on it. Like that's how I see her in the world. Is she's so open and sensitive to the beauty of
Mm,
living. She just does not shy away from anything. And she's a poet. And I'm a poet. And so I really love how beautifully she can immerse herself in an experience and then verbalize it. And I know that that's so important to her clients as well, to be able to create an atmosphere of beauty and sensitivity around everything that you're doing and realizing that all of that ripples out. And Narendra, she's got such a strength to her character and she's very mystical in her approach. And I try to be too, because death, I think, is extremely mystical. I think living is extremely mystical, but you tend to get labeled a certain way when you're very like woo. And I am definitely, the more deeply I go into this work, especially, and also the more deeply I go into my life, much more woo myself. And Narendra has made peace with that and been unabashed in that, and her abilities to really hold space with all of that. She's a
Mm,
medium. So
mm,
she's provide the permeability of realms. And she's also like incredibly artsy, just like she even I just look at her website and I wish I that I had her aesthetic. Like she creates so much beauty, and I love her work. And both of these women really approach their work with their communities in mind. You know, one of the things that not everybody understands is that death workers, we do not make money. Like we might make enough money to live if we've got like consistent clientele, but we do not have client retention because our clients die. So it's hard to keep that ball rolling, and it's even harder to keep that ball rolling without seeming predatory or being an ambulance chaser in any way. And so it can be a very tricky balance. It's very feast or famine. I've been going through a long period of famine. This has been the longest period of famine I've had in my career as a death doula, and that's just the way it is sometimes. So a lot of death doulas tend to resort to kind of an MLM approach and like, hey, we are living in a capitalist society. Times are
mhm.
hard. You make that money,
Right,
go do
right,
like no shame.
right.
And I remember a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur years ago telling me like, Britt, like, you would make more money if you were training people to do this work. And of course I would. That's how most death doulas do make their money, is they create training programs and they create more death doulas. I personally find that unethical because I know the work is hard to get. So when I have people that come to me asking like, hey, I'm curious, I feel called to this work, I always say, first of all, if you feel called to it, do it. But full transparency, this is not a way to support yourself comfortably or to make money. It's extremely difficult to do either of those doing this work.
Right.
So seeing the kinds of programs that Nyla and Narendra have, it feels very organic and very supportive to me, rather than seeing the more like MLM type of approach that I see a lot of other death doulas do, which again, no shade. It's tough out there.
So you've mentioned that you serve clients virtually and in person, so you already know about remote delivery. But when you think about reaching more people, especially people who don't even know that this kind of care exists, what role do you see technology playing? And where do you think it needs to be careful?
That is such a great question. Um, and I have such a resistance to involving tech, especially with work as sensitive as this. But I do understand like this is the world we're in. So I think if we could have some sort of app, perhaps, that helps people plug in all of their stuff. So, getting a death doula to help them figure out what the stuff is. Like, this is going to be your hospital. This is going to be your hospice. This is going to be your funeral home. This is going to be the people that take care of if you're doing organ donation or if you want to go to a body farm or something like that. Like, to have all of the contacts plugged in so that you have one place on your phone, or it's just like I just tap this icon and I can just tap contact this person, contact this person, contact that person. And we might have like some kind of pre-formatted blurbs of what to send out that would simplify things, because when you are in a grief space, all of that is so overwhelming. And
Mhm.
usually that's stuff that I take on as a death doula myself, to be like, I can be the person who does all those things for you. But if I can't be there in person, this could be helpful to people. And that doesn't mean that there's less work for me to do, because there's always so much work for me to do as a death doula. But
Right.
for somebody who's, a lot of us move away from our families, and that becomes really tricky. I've had several clients where it's legitimately very challenging to be like, we've got a child living in Chicago, we got a child living in Florida, we got a child living in Canada, and we've got mom living in California and she's dying. And,
Mm,
you know, I started my business in 2019. So I was dealing with these situations during COVID
goodness, yeah.
where people can't travel.
Mhm.
Two of these families have young babies at home. They can't afford to get exposed potentially to anything. In the early days of COVID, we were so worried about contagion reasonably. And so it was extremely hard. We mostly just did Zoom calls, but having something that was inclusive, just like all encompassing, all the things are right here. All I got to do is press the right button, send off the right thing to the right person. I think that something like that technology could be really helpful for, so that families who maybe cannot be as present as they would like to be for, many reasons could still be as helpful as they want to be.
Mhm.
But nothing compares to presence. Like if you can possibly be present, that is the best thing you can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what we're really a big part of the Wired Ape is maintaining that connection that we have through to other human beings,
Yeah.
nature, rituals, of course. Rituals are extraordinarily important to being humans. So you could imagine for a moment, you could sign something like a system or something, platform, movement, whatever, that brought you what you offer to every person who needs it before they reach, that crisis point. You mentioned people kind of tend to reach out to you like at the 11th hour, so to speak, right? Something that respects the artfulness that you bring, like checks this nature, the important nature of this work. What do you think that would look like? And what do you think that might change?
Oh man, if there was, and this is part of something, this is part of what I'm trying to do right now, because I'm realizing that it's not enough to give my information to these assisted living facilities or to these hospices. It's not
Mhm.
enough. I really need to get into the community and just start talking about death and grief and removing the taboo and demystifying it, and or remystifying it in the right ways.
Right, right.
So changing the culture is what I'm trying to do first. Right now I'm working in Reno with a couple of community members to try to create a space on apps like Discord and other encrypted apps, where we can have a group chat of, hey, let's check in with each other. Let's talk about our grief. I'm also offering like a community grief group that's in person, but I'm also trying to offer, and right now it's a very new offering, virtual grief groups so that people can come. But every bit that we can connect and normalize these conversations is what's going to help change that culture, so that people can feel like, hey, like some people do their taxes right in January. These
Mm,
go-getters. I'm not one of them.
right.
And they might just be like, hey, I'm 35 and I I just thought, like, I have capacity to do this right now. Why don't I just start making a generalized plan? Because of course, 35 in perfect health, statistically, you've got a lot of time. You could get hit
Mm,
by a bus tomorrow, but statistically, you've got a lot of time
right,
where you can
right.
be like, hey, in 2 years, I learned about how cremations are done. And since I'm really ecologically concerned, that's no longer in alignment with my values. What are my other options? And we'll change your little death plan. Be like, no, then no cremation. Let's make sure your loved ones know that you would like to do aquamation or whatever appeals to you. Then starting those conversations and normalizing them and stripping away labels like morbid and dark
Mm,
and hard, and just making it, what if it could be fun? What if it could be interesting? What if it could just be life? Because it is the one thing that we're all going to do. All that
right.
you may not have kids, you may not get married, you may not go to college, you are going to die. Every single
Mm,
one of us. Couldn't we
right.
think about that one thing, like, just occasionally,
Mhm.
maybe daily, and not have it be morbid? Just be like, yeah, maybe I don't need to be stressing about getting texted back right now because I'm going to die someday. And yeah, if he's not going to text back, he's not going to text back. Cool. Just letting it inform us on a more positive way. And I think tech, being that we are very, very busy people, the economy is rough for everyone right now. It is hard to parcel out our time and be in person as much as we would like to. And, as much as I truly believe we would be so much better with more time to do less and to be in person, just sharing space more. The reality of our situation right now is that that's not very feasible for everybody. And so having the ability to just go on your phone, click on an app, and send a message to your existential cafe group and be like, today I thought about dying and had a panic attack in my car today, and get some support, get some feedback from your friends that have already agreed that this is a safe space for those kind of conversations. That can be life saving, truly.
That's part of what we want to build with Ritual
Yeah.
OS is being able to bring these practitioners like you, even all of these different concepts into one place, I think would really help people a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we have time to mention where people can find you. Could you give us your website information and social media accounts?
Yeah, so I can be reached via my website at www.theartoftheend.com. I am also on social media at The Art of the End. I will be the only one with the black and white bee logo, and which is there because of the longstanding European tradition of telling the bees. Everybody had beehives, and so you would just inform the bees about things that were happening in life. And you would especially let the bees know if anybody had died because their ability to fly would take that message where it needed to go. Also, bees, when they are in orchards and in fields and they're just buzzing, they tend to dance in an infinity symbol, which I find absolutely mystical and cool. So that's part of my logo. I mentioned that to help glue the image in your mind. So I can be found there. My email address, phone numbers on there as well. So people can get in touch with me there if they need grief support, death planning, whatever. Just please reach out. Even if you just have some questions about dying and mortality, I'm here.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to take a moment, reflect on this conversation and what this has meant to us, because I don't think we should just let it pass. So what I keep coming back to is this thread of like art and intentionality that runs through everything you do. You didn't just survive those 4 near-death experiences. You listened to them and you've really built something from it. You didn't just leave through early childhood education. You carried that through the beginning and end of life and show how they marry each other into a completely new field. And the way that what you're describing, what matters most about that work, you're feeling alive, feeling loved, feeling autonomous, and feeling creative. It's not something that you necessarily just read in a textbook, right? It's something that you arrived at by sitting with the people in the most honest moments of their lives. So what you're doing with the Art of the End isn't just death work. It's really just a reclamation of something that our culture has lost, that we've the ability to approach our own mortality with beauty and presence and the same intentionality we bring to any other meaningful act of creation. But it's been genuine privilege in talking to you. I really applaud you for all of the work that you're doing. It's extraordinary work, and I just don't think that you hear enough personally.
Thank you so much for all of that reflection. That is really, really deeply meaningful to me. Thank you. Um, yeah, it's been a privilege to accept this work, to accept this task, and to be able to give these gifts to people. I feel profoundly lucky to have the ability, and it's been such a treat to be able to talk to you about it today. So thank you so much.